Welcome back to another episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. I'm your host, Mason Kinnahan, and today we are going to be talking about a lot of things. First off, we're going to get into the final roster reaction for the Washington Commanders. The Commanders announced their 53-man roster as of now. There still could be some changes going into the first week leading up here to week one of the NFL season, but for now, these are the 53 on the roster. So we'll get into that, my reaction to that first things first, and then we'll get into my full season predictions for the Washington Commanders. We'll start with the record prediction. We're going game by game. We're doing the record prediction. I've got the entire list of the schedule out there. I've got wins, losses for each game. Going to go over each of them. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then after that, something that I'm excited about to do is superlatives. I'm going to go over my superlatives, or my preseason superlatives for the Washington Commanders in the 2025 season. In this, who's going to be my MVP, offense player of the year, defense player of the year, breakout player, stuff like that for Washington. I'm excited to do that. And then at the end, I got to talk about the Micah Parsons trade. All right, Parsons, of course, being traded from the Cowboys to the Packers, one of the biggest trades that the NFL has seen, really, in the NFL's history. 2 first-round picks going over to Dallas for that. So I'm going to give my thoughts on the Micah Parsons trade. What does that mean for Washington as well towards the end of this episode? But let's just kick things off with the final roster reaction. The 53 are set for the Commanders. As of now, they go 3 quarterbacks: Jane Daniels, Marcus Mariota, Josh Johnson. I feel like, I got one wrong here. I thought it was just going to be 2 quarterbacks, and either Johnson or Hartman were going to be fighting for a spot on the practice squad. Instead, Johnson gets the nod onto the 53-man roster. He will be the emergency quarterback, so he will not be activated on game days, but he will still, be eligible to play just in case of injury. 3 quarterbacks. Again, they went with 3 quarterbacks last year too, with the third quarterback being Jeff Driscoll. Let's just say if Johnson's ever playing out there and the score isn't like a blowout with Washington up by a ton, Washington is in big trouble. So that's just what I'll say about that. But it's pretty self-explanatory there on the quarterback position. Moving on to running backs, Washington kept 4 running backs. Again, with the Brian Robinson trade, this was going to be the case. You got Austin Eckler, Jeremy McNichols, Bill Krosky-Merritt, and Chris Rodriguez as the 4 running backs. This is the running back room for Washington. And if you told me, at the beginning of training camp, really, that Brian Robinson would not have been on this roster, I would have called you crazy, because Robinson has clearly been, what you're going to get out of him. And, he may not be a top 10, top 15 running back in the league, but you know what you have in him, right? And going with this running back room which is pretty inexperienced beyond Austin Eckler. It is inexperienced. And we know with Eckler's injury history, he most likely will not be playing, 15, 16 games even for Washington, which is going to put a lot of pressure on Jeremy McNichols, Bill Krosky-Merritt, Chris Rodriguez, those 3 guys to produce even without Robinson and without Eckler. We've talked about Bill on this podcast before, just the hype around him. He had a great preseason. He did not play in that third preseason. Oh no, maybe he did play in the third preseason game. I don't remember if he did or not, but he basically, was sat out with the starters a ton throughout the preseason. Same with Chris Rodriguez too. I love Chris Rodriguez, what he's showing in the preseason. A guy who was cut by this same coaching staff and this same front office this time last year. He did not make this roster. He was cut by Washington, and now he makes this roster. And not only that, but he's going to play a huge part in this backfield production for the Washington Commanders this season. We move on to wide receiver now. With receivers, they go with 5. I was wrong on this one as well. I went with 6 receivers, but 5 makes a ton of sense just because no one really showed why they should deserve a spot on this roster for that 6th position. Terry McLaurin, Noah Brown, Deebo Samuel, Luke McCaffrey, and Jalen Lane are the 5 for the Commanders. Maybe the question, was Luke McCaffrey going to be a surprise cut? Was he, going to potentially be traded? Maybe there was a little rumblings about that among the fan base, but ultimately McCaffrey stays on the active roster after not really having an impressive preseason. He definitely was outplayed by rookie 4th-round pick Jalen Lane out of Virginia Tech during this preseason. And I would say Lane has jumped McCaffrey in the depth chart already, even though McCaffrey was a 3rd-round pick and Lane was a 4th-round pick. Beyond these five, it is definitely a question who that sixth receiver is going to be. Do they even need to have a sixth receiver, on this 53-man roster? That's also, a question. Maybe with the injury history of Noah Brown, of Deebo Samuel, you do want a sixth receiver on this 53-man roster. I know Washington is meeting with Kendrick Bourne on Tuesday about a potential addition there. We'll have to see, how that goes. But I know Kendrick Bourne could potentially be an option for that wide receiver six position. And for people saying he could be the wide receiver 3 or 4 on this team, I just don't see it. Bourne is someone who also has a pretty bad injury history, along with guys like Noah Brown and Samuel. I would probably expect him to be the fifth or sixth guy. I don't think he's, what people make him out to be from 3 or 4 years ago anymore with these injuries. It's hard to, there's a reason why he left New England. I know he kind of requested his release there, but New England kept eight wide receivers. Now I think they only have seven, but they originally kept 8 receivers, and he was one of them. But he could not, that he could not thoroughly beat out some of these younger receivers that were on New England's roster, and ultimately he requested his release. But 5 receivers for now is probably where we're at. Again, with the healthy McLaurin and with the healthy Noah Brown, I have a lot of confidence in this receiver room. Without McLaurin and without Brown, this is one of the worst receiver rooms in the game. So there a lot is riding on the health. I mean, you could say that with any team in any position, any player, but a lot is riding on the health of these guys to stay healthy at the top of the depth chart so that the guys towards the bottom can get some experience before being thrown into a tough position. Moving on to tight ends now. 4 tight ends for Washington. This was pretty, pretty self-explanatory. Zach Ertz, John Bates, Ben Sinnott, Colson Yankoff are the 4. Yankoff made the roster this time last year as well, so wasn't really surprised to see him on the roster again for Washington. The question in this room will definitely be the health of Zach Ertz, like a lot of these guys, and that will be something I get into, with the record prediction, the season preview. The health for this team is just crucial. And then Ben Sinnott is going to be the big question mark. How much playing time is he going to actually get behind Ertz and Bates? And if Ertz goes down, at some point this season, can Sinnott or can Yankoff step up and be a reliable target in the passing game for Jaden Daniels at tight end? Because Zach Ertz was huge for Jaden last year, and especially in that NFC Championship game. Moving on to the offensive line, 9 offensive linemen for Washington. They go Tunsil, Coleman, Biotish, Allegretti, Wiley, Connerly, Fant, Paul, and Scott, with Sam Cosmi starting the season on injured reserve. Got this position all good in my prediction. Tunsil, Coleman, Biotish. I would maybe say Wiley and Connerly are going to be your starting 5 with Wiley at right guard, but it's a little unclear if it's going to be Wiley or Allegretti starting at that right guard spot for Washington in week 1. I do expect Connerly to be that starting right tackle, though, for Washington. He's definitely earned that position and earned the right to say, he is the starter for this team at right tackle. He had a great preseason. It took him a little bit to adjust from that left side to the right side, but Connerly looks to be good to go for week 1. George Fant was the late free agent addition for Washington. Washington needed definitely some tackle / guard depth with the addition of Fant. Now with Sam Cosmi heading to injured reserve for the first 4 weeks, they kind of just needed some depth at tackle, and they go with Fant over a guy like Foster Sorrell, who potentially, who didn't really play that great in the preseason and did not earn a spot on this roster. Chris Paul had a great preseason and definitely earned a spot on this roster. He earned that backup guard position and will definitely be a key piece on this offensive line. With Coleman coming back from an injury, he should be good to go week 1, 100%, but could still be nursing it a little bit. And with Cosmi as well out for the first 4 weeks, Chris Paul could potentially see some playing time with, another injury if that were to happen. And then Trent Scott on this offensive line, he's just been a reliable swing tackle for Washington over the last couple of years. So no surprise he's on this roster. Let's move on to the defensive side of the ball now, starting with the defensive line. Daron Payne, Javon Kinlaw, Dietrich Wise, Dorrance Armstrong, Jacob Martin, Johnny Newton, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, and Eddie Goldman are your 8 defensive linemen. I knew there was going to be an odd man out here. That odd man out is Clelin Ferrell, who I predicted in my prediction for the 53-man roster. Ferrell was someone who was a starter for Washington last season, was one of their big free agent acquisitions during Adam Peters' first free agency back in March 2024. And Farrell not making this roster here this time around is definitely a thing to look at as an improvement on this roster. This was a position that Washington addressed thoroughly in free agency with the additions of Wise, with the additions of Jacob Martin, Eddie Goldman, Javon Kinlaw. That's 4 new guys that Washington signed in free agency for this defensive line. You still got Dorrance Armstrong coming back. You've still got, Deron Payne and Johnny Newton in the middle. Newton's going to have to step up big time here with no more Jonathan Allen on that defensive line. And John Baptiste was one that was interesting to me. Was he going to make this roster or not over a guy like Clelin Ferrell? Or maybe if Washington just kept, it would have been crazy, but 7 defensive linemen, which I believe they did last year. But Jean Baptiste was definitely he didn't have, a hot start to camp or anything like that. Was kind of, hit with injuries a little bit. He showed flashes last season. I think that's why Washington kept him on this roster, but there was a good chance, in my opinion, that they were to keep a guy like Farrell over someone like Jean Baptiste at this point, but they keep Jean Baptiste, and I'm, totally cool with it as well. Linebacker is interesting to me. Washington keeps 7 linebackers on this roster, technically 6 if you count, Von Miller as more of an edge rusher defensive lineman. It would be 6, but 7 linebackers is what's listed as. Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu, Von Miller, which is more of a defensive lineman. Jordan McGee, Nick Bellore, Kane Majano, and Alei Kaho are your 7 linebackers. Wagner and Louvu are going to be your 2 starters again. A lot's going to be riding, on their health, but there are some guys behind them that are, young and that have got experience in the preseason. It'll be interesting to see, how they start off this season. Jordan McGee was someone who maybe was a potential IR candidate to start the year. Seems to be healthy and ready to go. Nick Bellore has been a great special teamer for Washington, one of the best special teamers last year in the NFL. So glad to see that he's back. Kane Madrano, the rookie, 5th-round rookie out of UCLA, is also on this roster. And then Alei Kaho, the UCLA linebacker, UDFA. So Madrano and Kaho, 2 teammates from last season, both of them on this roster, one a 5th-round pick and one a UDFA. Kaho had a great preseason. They played him a lot throughout the preseason. I would assume he was probably up there in terms of, tops, led the defense in snaps throughout the preseason. But this is a pretty, loaded linebacker room in terms of players. Keeping 6 shows how much they like some of these younger guys, right? Nick Bellore made this unit on special teams, but in terms of Madrano, Kaho is probably the big name there. That's like, okay, this guy earned his spot in the preseason and earned a spot on this roster. But overall, I probably would not expect a lot of time for Madrano, Kaho, unless we get some injuries to some of the top guys in that linebacker room. Cornerbacks and the secondaries, 10 players in the secondary. Marshawn Lattimore, Trey Amos, Mike Sainristil, Jonathan Jones, and Noah Igbenogany are your 5 cornerbacks. Really no surprises there. It looked like they were shopping Noah Igbenogany for a little bit. Maybe they still are, but Igbenogany got a lot of run in the preseason. I would still expect Sainristil, to start in that slot position for Washington. But Igbenogany is a good depth piece. I will say, if you're able to get like a 5th-round pick or better for him, I would more than happy, ship him away. But it didn't look like Washington was willing to ship him away based on the, the demand they were getting. Safeties: Quan Martin, Will Harris, Jeremy Reeves, Percy Butler, Tyler Owens. The same 5 beyond, swapping Chin for Harris really as last year. Owens as a UDFA out of Texas Tech, making this 53-man roster again. So shout out to him. And Quan Martin, Will Harris are probably going to be the 2 top guys. You're probably going to see a lot of Jeremy Reeves as well, and Percy Butler. I really think all 5 of these safeties could get time on defense throughout this season. So that's going to be a fun position to watch, as it's definitely one of the positions where there's a new face. No one's really talking about Will Harris a lot. He wasn't really a big name, but he's going to be starting for Washington, and we could really see some jumps from guys like Jeremy Reeves or maybe Tyler Owens even on this defense. And for the specialists, Matt Gay, Tressway, and Tyler Ott are your 3 specialists. So in total, that would be 25 on defense, 25 on offense, and 3 on special teams. If I did my math correctly there, I believe I did. 18. Yep. So 25 on both sides of the ball and then 3 on special teams. But let's jump into now my record prediction for the Washington Commanders. This is big time here. All right. Look, last season, I don't want to talk about my record prediction. It was not good. It was not good. I believe it was the opposite of what actually happened. This year is definitely interesting. I'm probably going to go a little bit conservative here, but let's jump into it. Weeks 1 through 4, we've got Giants, Packers, Raiders, Falcons to kick off the season. Week 1 against the Giants, I have a W. We're going to have a full preview episode out this Friday with a guest. That's going to be a lot of fun. I will say I am a little nervous about this kind of being, a tough matchup week 1. You look at what Russell Wilson did to Washington's defense last year when he was on the Steelers. Washington lost that game against the Steelers when Washington came in as favorites. Again, this Giants defense is very good. This Giants defense is going to be very good this year. And I know Washington has 5 at the end of the day. That's why I'm picking them to win this game. But I would not be surprised if this is a close one. I'll go into a full preview in Friday's episode. But in this one, I have a win, but it's more of a cautious W, maybe a little bit lowercase W than an uppercase W here. Week 2, Thursday night against the Packers. I have them losing this game on Thursday Night Football. Look, it's going to be tough going up to Lambeau. Short week to kick off the season. Really, it's going to be a tough matchup. I know Dan Quinn and that coaching staff is already making preparations and game plans for that week 2 matchup, just because they know they're not going to have a ton of time between Sunday's matchup against the Giants and then the following Thursday against the Packers. That's going to be a tough turnaround for this team, but still. That'll be, one to watch. Definitely think this game could go either way. In this scenario, I'm going to say they lose this game, but, it really could go either way. Week 3 against the Raiders, Geno Smith and company back at Northwest Stadium. I'm going to go with a win here for Washington, so they start the year 2-1. I think this is a pretty easy win for them. The Raiders are kind of just on their own separate path right now compared to what Washington's trajectory is at. That'll be fun, though, seeing Ashton Genty at Northwest Stadium. Then week 4, you've got a rematch against Michael Penix and the Atlanta Falcons. I think Washington takes this one as well. So they're going to start the year 3-1. The Falcons, I don't know how much I trust Raheem Morris right now. I think Morris is definitely on the hot seat after the year he had last year and, just the entire debacle of bringing in Kirk Cousins, drafting Michael Penix early, and how that kind of all played out last year. I think Morris is definitely on the hot seat. It's really going to rely on Michael Penix's play at the end of the day, and he's got some good receivers there. I think it'll be, a good test for. The Falcons are missing their blindside blocker, their left tackle. He's out for the year, so it's definitely going to be, a good opportunity for this pass rush to get home on a guy like Michael Penix, because if you can get Penix out of rhythm and out of the pocket, I think you've got a good chance against the Falcons. So starting the year off 1-3. Let's go to weeks 5-8. Starting off with week 5 at the Chargers. I think this is going to be a win for Washington. They're going to start the year 4-1 at this point, which is week 5. I think this is a big time win for Washington against LA. So after starting the season 4-1, I have them losing week 6 to the Chicago Bears. I just really like what I'm seeing right now from Caleb Williams. And yeah, I know Washington fans like to make fun of Bears fans and whatnot from what happened last year and what happened, basically what happened last year. And of course, Jane versus Caleb and all of that. I think this is going to be a really fun matchup. I think this could be a very high scoring game. I just love the, what the Bears are building on offense. And I don't know if it'll work out long term with Ben Johnson, but they have the talent to just go off for 30, 35 points. And I don't know how much I trust this Commanders defense yet to really stop a high-powered offense like what I project the Chicago Bears to be this season. So maybe that might be controversial, but I have them losing to the Bears. Week 7 against the Cowboys, I think, is a win at Jerry's World. I think, we'll talk about the Micah Parsons trade in a little bit, but it's definitely been quite the last offseason for the Cowboys. I definitely think it's still going to be difficult to beat, an in division opponent. It always is, but Washington has the better roster and especially the better offense. I love Washington's offense and how they match up against Dallas's defense without Micah Parsons. Dallas's defense could be in a lot of trouble this year. I really think they're probably going to be in the bottom, 5 or 10 in the league. Week 8 against the Chiefs. I believe this is Monday Night Football. I want to say I have them losing to Patrick Mahomes. It's Jaden's first trip to Arrowhead Stadium. Going to be a crazy environment. Jaden versus Patrick Mahomes. I just have them losing. I don't really, have much else to say. This Chiefs roster, yes, it was a down year last year, but they still made the Super Bowl, right, at the end of the day. And yes, they got blown out by the Eagles, but this is still a very good Chiefs team. And I think it's going to be a very fun matchup. But this is kind of a stretch where the schedule starts to get really difficult. Washington's, start to the season is very easy, but then towards the end, it just gets really difficult. And Washington should get healthier, as the season goes on, just because you're going to get Sam Cosmi back after the first 4 weeks and guys on the offensive line will get healthy. But this is a stretch for Washington where you look at Washington's schedule last season and then you look at it this season, it is a drastic difference. Washington's playing a second place in the division, schedule compared to a fourth place in the division schedule. So you've got some of these tougher matchups like you basically got some of these tougher matchups of teams who play second in their own divisions because of it. So in this one, I have them losing to the Chiefs on Monday Night Football. So at this point, they would be 5-3, I believe, 5-3 through the first 8 weeks. Moving on to week number 9, Sunday Night Football against the Seahawks. That's going to be a fun matchup because that'll be Washington wearing their throwback Super Bowl era jerseys against Seattle's throwback jerseys. Northwest Stadium on Sunday Night Football. It's going to be a lot of fun. I have them beating Sam Darnold and the Seattle Seahawks in that one. Week 10 against the Lions, a rematch of last year's NFC divisional round game where Washington upset Detroit in Detroit. This one's going to be at Northwest Stadium. This is currently the second of 4 home games in 5 weeks, so 4 straight home games for Washington if you include their bye. Against the Lions here, I think it's going to be an L. All right, I think it's going to be an L. Like I said, this is just a tough stretch. Monday Night Football, Sunday Night Football, and then the Lions. It's just a tough stretch of games for Washington. I think they go, 1-2 between week 8 and week 10. But I could definitely see them beating these teams. It's just really hard to judge, kind of in the preseason where some of these teams are at, and especially where this defense is at. If I'm Washington right now, how much improvement? If we see a ton of improvement from this defense early on in the season, I think there's a good chance Washington can beat these guys. And I'm not saying they get blown out by the Lions or blown out by the Chiefs, anything like that. I just, think these are going to be some tough opponents and tough matchups for the Commanders in this one. Week 11 will be against the Dolphins, and that will be in Spain, Madrid. I think that will be a W over the pond for the Commanders. It'll be a little morning game. They've got a nice bye week after. Yes, they're coming off that loss to the Lions, but I think they travel over to Spain and they pick up a big time win against the Dolphins. Right the ship before the bye week. Week 13 against the Broncos and Bo Nix and company. I have them losing this. I love the Broncos defense once more. And, I think it's really going to be up to Bo Nix and how is he going to take another leap in his play or is he going to have, that sophomore slump? I'm not sure where I stand currently on Bo Nix. I just really like this roster for Denver. And, coming off the bye, it's just going to be a tough matchup. I believe both teams are coming off the bye in this matchup. So I think they're going to lose this one. This means Washington now stands at 7-5 through the first 13 weeks of the season. So heading into the final stretch now, this is where things get crazy. 4 division games in the last 4 weeks, really. 4 straight division games to end the season. But first, in week 14, the Vikings against J.J. McCarthy, another rookie or second-year quarterback at this point, J.J. McCarthy. I have them losing this. I just, once more, just the defense for the Vikings, I think is really good. And they're going to apply a lot of pressure on Jaden Daniels. And yeah, Jaden is great under pressure, but I also kind of, think this is going to be a tough matchup for Washington's defense. We've got Aaron Jones in that backfield, a very balanced, good play calling team from Kevin O'Connell and company. I have them losing this game. Maybe it's another close one, but we saw a lot of close games last year for Washington, and it's just just if you think about it, it'd be very, very tough to win the amount of one possession games that they did last year. And so some of these games, that you think would be close in one possession, but just have them, going the other way this time around. Washington, though, heads into week 15 on a 2-game losing streak at 7-6. They need a win against the Giants, and I think they get one. So a sweep of the Giants. Maybe Jackson Dart is starting by this time here in week 15, but I think they pick up another win against New York. So now you go to at this point, maybe Brian Dable is fired by week 15 at this point. So I think the Giants could definitely be in some trouble at this point in the season. Then home against the Eagles, I think would be a big time win for Washington. Picking up another win against the Eagles just to continue at week 16. We know what happened week 16 last year, but week 16 against the Eagles here at home again. I think Washington picks up a W. So at this point, they are now 9-6 at this point. So 9-6 at this point, heading into the final 2 weeks. Look, maybe I'm wrong. All right. I have them losing to the Cowboys in week 17. I just think that this is it's very tough to win divisional games. And in the NFC East, it's even tougher. I don't remember the last time Washington swept the Cowboys in the regular season. I don't remember the last time that happened, but I think Washington, takes an L here against the Cowboys. I know it's at home, but this is just how it goes sometimes. I feel like between these two teams, where the better team just cannot win. It's happened before when Dallas was the better team and Washington went in and upset them. So that is definitely something to look at. And then the Eagles week 18 in Philly. You're 9-7 at this point, right? A win maybe to get you into the playoffs. It'd be difficult. It's going to be really difficult. I just really think this Eagles roster is great. It's great. And sweeping the Eagles would definitely be, a huge accomplishment for Washington. I don't know if I can do it though. I don't know if I can do it. And at this point, you're 9-8, borderline in the playoffs or not. I definitely think the floor for this team is probably 8 wins. All right, the ceiling is definitely 12 or 13. I went very conservative just because I have a lot of worries still about the schedule. I know looking at the schedule preseason wise, it could be a lot different than looking back at it after the season, right, when what happens. But there's some of these matchups are against good quarterbacks, which Washington did not play against a lot last year. I know there's Jalen Hurts twice, right? Dak Prescott twice. You got Mahomes, you've got Herbert. There's a lot of these games when you're playing against good quarterbacks, and I don't know if we'll have to wait and see. I think Washington kind of got away with it last year on the defensive side of the ball. This year, there's some improvement, but I don't know how much improvement that really is at this point, because I don't know if I trust guys like Will Harris, or Javon Kinlaw to have, big breakout seasons yet. We'll have to wait and see. I'm also worried about the health of this defense as well. You've got some older players, Bobby Wagner out there. And I feel if Bobby Wagner goes down and misses a couple of games, or maybe misses, a stretch of games, I don't know if I trust the other linebackers on this roster to make up, Bobby Wagner and what he can do. The same goes with guys like Zach Ertz, right? Washington was very lucky last year in terms of injuries. I don't know how lucky they'll be again this year. It's kind of, just how it kind of swings, right? If you're the healthiest team, you're going to have a lot of success. Washington was very healthy last year. Beyond the Jonathan Allen injury, Washington didn't really miss any key players at any point in the season. It was just Jonathan Allen and Noah Brown that were like the two big misses. But even those guys were replaceable, though, for Washington. So that is my record prediction, 9-8. Win a little conservative. Yes, some of those games can go the other way. Definitely think the floor is probably 8 wins for this team. The ceiling is probably 12, is what I would say. I think there's a better chance than not of this team making the playoffs. I don't know if 9-8 will cut it, though, but we shall wait and see. All right, superlatives for this Washington team. We'll start with the MVP. Who's going to be the most valuable player on this Commanders team here in 2025? Without a doubt, it's got to be Jane Daniels, right? That's the answer here. I think Daniels has another great season. It's just how much support is he going to get from the guys around him and from his defense? That's going to be the big question here. But I don't think we're in for a Daniels sophomore slump at all. I think last year proved that he can learn and he can, he was winning in so many ways on the offensive side of the ball that I don't know what else can really stop him at this point. All right, offensive player of the year. I'm gonna go with this is offensive player of the year, not counting Jane Daniels, guys. All right, so not counting Jane Daniels, I'm gonna go with Laramie Tunsil. I think Washington's gonna get a big boost on that blind side for Jaden, and it's really gonna matter. Last year, of course, Brennan Coleman and Cornelius Lucas were kind of swapping out for the early season, and then it became Brennan Coleman at left tackle for Washington. But he had his ups and downs last season, and bringing in one of the best left tackles in the game, especially in pass pro, is huge. Is huge, and you've got such good reliability now at the left tackle position. If you're Cliff Kingsbury, I think he's going to do a ton for this team, make another Pro Bowl, and potentially even be an All Pro this year for Laramie Tunsil. Defensive Player of the Year, I'm going to go Frankie Louvu. This was an interesting one. I don't really know who to go with here on the defensive side of the ball. Louvu, though, I feel is probably one of the safer options. I'm not going with Wagner just because I don't know with his injury. Like, I know he's been pretty reliable so far, but if he goes down, I think there's a greater chance he goes down than a guy like Louvu. Louvu as well can just do so much, and Joe Witt has so much creativity of what Louvu can do. With what Louvu can do, I think Louvu is in for another big year. Most improved, I'm gonna go Chris Rodriguez this season. I know in the running back room, all the hype is around Bill Krosky Merritt right now, but I think Rodriguez could get some good carries early on in the season and good playing time, and I think he has what it takes to make a difference and have a pretty good season. This was someone that did not make the final roster last year, but now is in line to put up, starting numbers as a running back this season. So Rodriguez would be my most improved. And then first time Pro Bowler, I'm gonna go Quan Martin. I think Quan Martin is gonna be in for another big step here in 2025. He's improved every year of his career so far, and he is in a contract year. He's up for a contract after this season, but I think he's going to put in another solid year for Washington and Joe Witt's defense. I know Joe Witt and that coaching staff has loved what they've seen out of Quan Martin so far, and they've praised him a ton in the offseason and in the preseason so far. So I think Martin is in for a very big year. All right, those are my superlatives. Let's move on to the final topic of the day. Micah Parsons' reaction to this trade here. Look, you can make all the jokes about Jerry and stuff, and yeah, this is just a pretty stupid move. I'm unsure and unclear what the path the Cowboys are going in at this point, because if you do hypothetically, want to go full rebuild and rebuild this roster, why are you giving CeeDee Lamb a record-breaking contract? Why are you giving Dak Prescott the $60 million a year, right? If you want to go like full rebuild and get these draft picks and all of that, you've got too many good players on your roster currently. And you just gave a lot of them a whole lot of money that it's going to be very difficult to move off of. So the only reason I see this trade existing is because of the ego Jerry Jones has. And I don't really understand what he's saying with I don't want to talk to his agent, or I don't want his agent to be in the room while we discuss a potential contract. There's no way Jerry hasn't, worked with agents before in the past when dealing with some of these contracts, right? I just don't understand what Jerry is doing and Jerry's, path right now. I know probably Stephen Jones has probably more say than what, people are expecting right now. I would blame him as much as blaming Jerry right now. I think both of them have, an equal amount of say in what's occurring. So I don't see this getting better anytime really for the Cowboys. I think there's a good chance, Stephen Jones is as bad as Jerry Jones is currently, which is pretty bad. So I'd hate to be a Cowboys fan right now, but that's just kind of where things are at. This is huge for Washington. Now you only play Micah Parsons once this season, and you don't have to play him twice every year now from here on out. It's going to be a fun matchup going up against him in Lambeau, in week 2 in that Thursday night football game. But I mean, not having to play him twice a year is huge. Is huge. So thank you, Jerry Jones, for trading him because I don't want to. I don't want to. He's very good. He's on pace to be a Hall of Famer, and having to not to play him now twice a year is very good. So thank you, Jerry Jones. All right. That'll wrap things up, though, here on this episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. Next podcast will be out, like I mentioned, on Friday, previewing Washington's showdown, week 1 showdown against the New York Giants. We've got a football game this weekend. We're ready to go. I'm excited. I know the fans are excited. It's going to be a lot of fun. Preview episode out on Friday, but that'll do it for me. I've been your host, Mason Kinnahan, here on Keeping Up with the Commanders. See you guys next one. Peace.